Let's open up the Vintage Collection 3.75-inch figure of Bo-Katan Kryze, Plazir-15 version.
Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it.
Hello there, thanks for visiting Villa Varykino. It's an exciting time as a collector of the Vintage Collection line of Star Wars figures because we have the newest wave showing up here in New Zealand. So far I have found 5 of the wave of 7 and I've opened up all of them except for Bo-Katan Kryze, the Plazir-15 version. I have found and opened up Jodna Narwood from Skeleton Crew, that fantastic Ahsoka Tano Paradia version, the Mandalorian Imperial Base version, and the K2SO recard on an Andor backing card. And I loved all of those figures, and now I've got the 5th one. I'm still on the hunt for the final 2. Fingers crossed I'll find them soon. So I'm really excited to open this one up. She does look very similar to the original one, which I do have on hand for a bit of comparison, but I think this one's going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait to open her up. So thanks so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll take a closer look at the figure, the accessories, and all of the details and articulation. But first, let's take a quick look at the backing card. The Vintage Collection backing cards are heavily inspired by the original Kenner packaging from the 1970s and 80s. We've got the Star Wars logo here at the top and the Mandalorian logo here in red. We've got a single chrome racetrack encircling the character art here on the right. And for this version of Bo-Katan Kryze, we have a green accent color, both for the nameplate here and behind the character. The nameplate here reads Bo-Katan Kryze in a white font, and we also have this subtitle, Plazir-15. Now we've got a really nice shot here of the figure here with her accessories. Now she comes with a few extras here compared to her earlier version. Of course, we have her 2 Mandalorian blaster pistols and her removable helmet, but she also comes with the dark saber as well. The earlier version, of course, she doesn't have that. Now we can see her wielding the dark saber here in the side art, and I do quite like this art, even though I don't usually like darker images. This one is from the Mines of Mandalore, which is kind of curious because, as we can see from that subtitle, it is named Plazir-15. Now this shot isn't actually from the planet Plazir-15. This is when she is wielding the dark saber, rescuing Din Djarin in the Mines of Mandalore. So I think it's kind of interesting that they have called this the planet. Now this Plazir-15 is where she actually takes full ownership of the dark saber from Din Djarin. So I kind of understand why they have called it that, because that's when she formally gets the dark saber, even though the picture they have used here is from when she wields it in the Mines of Mandalore. And there's a little bit of information on the back that I think helps sort of bridge that bit of a gap there. So of course on the back, as usual, we have that accent color green, but we have a blurb for this one, and I'll just read it quickly. After Bo-Katan Kryze saves Din Djarin from a cyborg in the Mines of Mandalore, he determines the darksaber should be returned to her as the rightful owner. So I think that it's a little bit sort of hidden and a little bit sort of cryptic here on the back, but I think it explains why this one is not called Mines of Mandalore like the actual Mandalorian version figure that actually comes with the Mines of Mandalore subtitle. This one is Plazir-15 because that's when she sort of formally gets the darksaber. A little bit tricky. I think it perhaps could have been a little bit cleaner in terms of the, you know, the combination of subtitle and character art, but I do kind of understand where Hasbro was coming from there. This one is VC339, and of course on the side here, being the modern backing card style here, we have an image of the front of the backing card, and I really like the posed image here of the figure itself. We have Bo-Katan here with her helmet on, and she is holding the darksaber accessory, kind of echoing the character art here from the backing card, which I quite like there. Of course, the rest of the backing card's fairly plain. We've got the Vintage Collection logo on the back, the barcode, copyright text, all of that kind of stuff. So let's take a quick comparison of this new version of Bo-Katan Kryze with the earlier version, which I have on hand here. I'm just going to swap them around. So we've got the older one first and the newer one here on the right. Now, just picking them up, this one is that thinner, sort of more flimsy cardboard. The new one, much more rigid, which I quite like. And especially if you like to keep your figures carded, you will appreciate the thicker cardboard. It's just a little bit more durable. And standing stands a little bit straighter. This one's got a slight curve to it because of that thinner cardboard. So in terms of the character art here, I like this one. Even though it is darker, but we've got a lot of black colors to it, the actual picture is a lot more high resolution. I can really see the detail, especially on her Night Owl helmet there. It's really nice. This one, it's a little bit grainy. It's like they've taken a screenshot of the, the series episode. It's just a little bit grainy, like they've sort of zoomed in a little bit too much on an image there, and it's not my favorite, even though I can actually see more of her costume compared to that one there. They both use the same accent color for the nameplate and behind the character, but this one's white font versus a black font there. Of course, we can see the layout of the figures and accessories are different. We've got two blaster pistols to the left here. They are kind of spaced apart on the right. The helmet's in the same place, and we've got the addition of the Darksaber with the new version. So the older one was also done back in that era where we still had the sort of Kenner-inspired background here, VC226, where we've got the pictures there of some of the other figures in the wave. Of course, we now have the new style. I'm kind of mixed. I like this sort of nostalgia of the original black version here, but I do quite like the posed shot of the figure there out of the packaging with the accessories. I think that that's kind of a fun reference there, especially if you don't take your figures out. You kind of get a little bit of an idea about what they would look like out of their packaging. So because I don't have this one out of the packaging yet, I'm going to do a quick comparison of these two figures while they're still in their bubbles. Sometimes it's easier to compare them directly side by side when you don't have to hold them. So of course I can see that there's going to be a lot of similarities between these two figures. Now that's going to be an interesting point if you are on a limited budget, or perhaps you don't feel the need to pick up every figure. Is this one going to be worth it? And I can see some differences, and it's kind of interesting. I'm not sure how I feel about them just yet. I unfortunately had a few paint flaws on the helmet of this particular older one. The blue looks a little bit smudged in places, which you can kind of get away because of course her helmet is weathered, but the paint job on my new helmet is a lot cleaner, and I do like that one. Now of course Bo-Katan does change her hairstyle between the different episodes of The Mandalorian. In season 3 she has slightly longer hair, and like we saw on the recent Ahsoka Paradia figure, Hasbro did actually go in and accurize her montrol, her head tails that were longer in the Ahsoka series compared to her appearance in The Mandalorian. So I was so excited, and I thought maybe Hasbro would go in and create a new hair piece for Bo-Katan to make her hair sort of longer and more accurate to her season 3 appearance, but it appears that they have not done that. That looks like the exact same hairstyle as we had from her earlier appearance, so that is a little bit of a shame. Of course, as we see here in the Mines of Mandalore, in this shot here, she has her new Beskar armor shoulder piece with the Mythosaur signet. So that is a difference. A little bit hard to see because it's kind of hidden by the plastic, but she does have that silver shoulder piece. So that is going to be a different element between the two figures. On the whole, the sculpting does look pretty much the same. There is a difference in paint job on her chest armor though. The original one was a little bit more of a softer silver with a bright silver weathering along the edges. This new one is a bit more of a darker gunmetal silver without that additional weathering on the edges, which is a little bit different. In terms of the blue, subtly different blue, especially as we look at those leg plates there. The older version is a little bit of a brighter blue, a little bit more muted tones here on the new version. And there's also a difference in the accessories. The original blaster pistols were a brilliant silver with a brown painted grip. The new ones are dark. They almost look like a straight black plastic. No paint job there, no accent on the grip at all. So a little bit of a downgrade, I feel, on the blaster pistol accessories there. So it's going to be interesting to get this one out and just sort of see some of the details up close, because I'm a little bit, I don't like to say annoyed, but it is disappointing when we get a little bit of a downgrade, when we already have some really cool accessories, and then when we get pretty close to a recard of the figure, just a few differences, that we've got a bit of a downgrade on the accessories, which is a shame. I do note that on my particular ones, the headpiece on my original figure is a little bit sort of removed away from her headband. There is a bit of a gap. I wasn't too fond of that one, but this one was very hard for me to find. This one, my hair is attached much closer to her hairband, which I very much appreciate. And just in terms of the quality of this figure, it looks better than my my original one, especially with the smudges on my helmet. I was quite disappointed about that, but I know that that is just sort of random elements with this specific figure. Other people probably had much better painted helmets and much better attached hair pieces. So that is just a personal note for my two figures. I'm not sure how I feel about the sort of the detail on the chest armor there with the sort of softer weathering around the edges and that not being here. I guess I got to go back and sort of study the episodes and see if she really does sort of polish up her armor and see if that sort of fine weathering is not present in her later appearances there when she has her new hairstyle there. But overall, very, very similar. Looking at the attachments in terms of the hinging in that, it looks to be very similar hips, all the joins and the sculpting. I think this is at the baseline going to be pretty much the exact same figure with the exception of that shoulder piece. So really interesting to see those two side by side. So now I guess it's time to open this one up. So now I have Bo-Katan out of the packaging along with her accessories, her two blaster pistols, her dark saber and her helmet. Just wanted to point out, because it can be hard to see when they are carded, that this is a swappable helmet. So we're going to be having to pop off her head and swap on the helmet in a little bit. But let's get stuck in and check out the details on the Bo-Katan figure. So starting out with the head, I wish that they had taken the time to sculpt new hair, especially since it is a separate piece from the face. I don't think that would have been too much work, considering that they did that for the Ahsoka Tano Paradia figure that I absolutely love. I particularly love Bo-Katan's hair as we see her in season 3 of The Mandalorian. I prefer it over her earlier looks, so I would have preferred her to be more accurate to her appearance, especially when she gets the dark saber. I would have preferred that, but at least this one is attached very nicely at her metallic headband there. We've got some nice join lines there. Sometimes hair pieces can be just a little bit offset and you get a little bit of a gap there. It is pretty well painted. I've got a tiny mark on her temple here on the right. It's probably not even showing up on camera, but the silver band is painted quite nicely. I'm always a little bit worried that you get a little bit of paint spill on the face. That looks pretty nice there. And of course we've got the modern era of the photorealistic digital printing on the face. This particular figure, she does have a little bit more of a wide-eyed expression, just with the sort of the whites of her eyes being a little bit more visible than on some other figures, but it doesn't look sort of googly-eyed. I much prefer it over the older style of painting. We've also got a bit of an accent there on the lips and the eyebrows there, of course. Very nice. So moving on, we can see that she's got her night owl shoulder here on her left shoulder, but now we have basically the one new thing on this figure. We have her mythosaur symbol Beskar piece on her right arm here. So the symbol is quite small, quite low down. It's not as sort of clear as perhaps I thought it might have been. It was a little bit hidden in the plastic of the bubble. So this is my first sort of look at it there. It's a little bit of a shame that we've got such a hard line coming down here on the shoulder that isn't, well, we've got a little bit of a line here on the front of this one. I think it's a little bit of a distraction here on this particular one. It just sort of, particularly on some lighting angles, it is quite a hard line there. I don't really think that that's present on the original sort of costume shoulder piece there. I don't know. It almost looks intentional. Sometimes when I'm looking at the figures, I feel like I need to go back and watch an episode and just study the costume detail of a specific character, because sometimes I wonder if the details that Hasbro puts in are because it's accurate to the original costume, or perhaps they're, you know, maybe cutting a corner or two in terms of their action figures, because that line is kind of distracting me from the very cool little mythosaur signet there on her shoulder piece there. But if it's there on the original costume, then I guess I can't complain. So the rest of it is looking very similar to that original figure there. I really like the printing here on that night owl logo there on her shoulder. It's got some sort of weathering sort of scratches on it and stuff like that, of course, because her armor is a little bit sort of more battle worn. And then, of course, we've got this lovely sort of muted blue tone, now slightly different to the earlier version that was a little bit more of a vibrant blue. And we've got this really nice dark gunmetal finish on her chest plate, which I think sort of really fits with the backing card art, with that sort of dark lighting on the Mines of Mandalore sort of shot there from the backing card. I like that there. But we are missing any of that sort of brighter silver accenting around sort of the high points along the edges of her armor there. But we do have a nice, brilliant silver paint application for the Iron Heart, the detail in the center of the Mandalorian chest there. So moving down, we've got her painted hand plates on the backs of her gloves there. Those look nice and tidy. We've got a bit of an insert here for the back of her left gauntlet. That's looking quite tidily painted. A little bit of an overline spill here at the bottom, but I'm only noticing that when I'm looking up really, really close. Otherwise, that looks pretty nice. We've got good painted details here on her belt in terms of the silver buckling there, and we've got that same sort of metallic color coming down for sort of this little abdomen piece coming down on the underside of the belt there. The belt does look to be that sort of rubbery plastic. To fit. Yep, there we go. So they've got those little holes there at the underside. We'll be testing in her blaster pistols in a moment there. So they are flexible. Unfortunately, they are a little bit on the larger side rather than being sculpted onto her hips, because they are flexible. Oftentimes, you know, holsters, they do just have to be a little bit bigger in order to fit the blaster pistols. I guess it's a bit of a trade-off. I think I'd rather have more accurately sized blaster pistols and have slightly oversized holsters than the other way around. I do like being able to put blasters in holsters, you know, especially when she's got something else to hold, like the Darksaber. I'm probably not going to be putting the blaster pistols in her hand for my permanent display. Raising those up, we can see that she's got a metallic sort of hip plate here that crosses over that articulation point there. So there is that split line through that hip plate there, but nice shiny metal sort of finish there on those plates. We've got again that same blue of the rest of her armor here for her knee plates, her knee armor, and her shin guards there as well. The sculpting on the back of the boots is a little bit softer than some other figures I have seen. We can see that she's got sort of straps for her front shin armor, but the actual sculpting, particularly here, it's just a little bit soft. It's very subtle. It's kind of a little bit sort of run in with the rest of the boots there. It's a little softer than other figures I've seen. No buckle detail that I can really see there. A little bit of sort of a buckle detail here. A little bit of sort of a strap, but it's really subtle and a little bit soft. And of course she's got little sort of heels on her boots there and a strap across the top of the foot. No painting accents there. That is all just the one color plastic. Now on her back, she's pretty simple. For her pants, just that same color all the way down. Nice sculpting on the back pouches of her belt though. I quite like that. And I gotta say, the highlight of her back is this really cool jetpack. She has a very detailed jetpack here with some really nice hard lines and some really nice painted details here. So it is the dark metallic finish to match her chest plate here with that same blue color that we see on her other armor plates. We've even got a little yellow painted details, these little yellow triangles on these sides. So small, it's hard to focus on them there, but I really like the detail and I'm hoping it should actually pop off. Okay, there we go. We've got a low peg hole, actually. It's a little bit of an asymmetrical shape. This corner is cut off, so it will only go on one way. It's not circular, so it won't rotate. And yeah, it's actually kind of low down, not quite in the small of her back, but certainly lower down than other jetpacks. So it does actually sit up quite nicely on her back there. It's a nice sturdy peg, and it won't rotate. Sits very nicely and securely. I don't like it when the pegs for attachment are quite shallow or short, and it just sort of feels like you're going to knock them off when sort of adjusting your figure. So overall, nice tidy paint on this figure. I did have to source this one online from a local stocker, so I didn't get to see it in person, but the face paint looks nice even painting. I don't like it, especially when armor details are misaligned to the sculpting lines. It really draws your eye, but everything's looking really tidy tidy here. Nice, tidy iron heart, tidy sort of metallic paint in those areas. Belt buckles especially. I'm often drawn to belt buckles if they're off center. It looks odd to me. And a nice little sort of digital printing little decal there on the shoulder piece. So painting wise, she looks great. Whether or not that sort of weathering is missing, I think I'm going to have to go back and watch some Mandalorian episodes to sort of refresh my memory about that. But I feel like she looks pretty good all round. I like that dark metallic silver. Really matches her headband here nicely as well. Okay, so let's check out her articulation. I've already been moving some of her arms around just to look at the details. So let's check out her head. Nice and smooth. Being able to move her around. Her hair is not really limiting her movement much. It's a little bit short in the back, so if I'm trying to press her head back, it's not really going to go back beyond that, but I can tip her chin down quite a fair way, actually. It's quite a lot all the way down, almost. Yeah, it's quite nice. And of course, turning to the sides, all there. Okay, so we'll test the helmet out a little bit shortly as well, because I know that's going to be important, sort of really seeing, even though she's not really wearing her helmet on a Plazir-15, like the backing card, she does wear it when she's wielding the Darksaber in the Mines of Mandalore. So I really do want to see her with her helmet on. And of course, it's kind of fun. Now we have two versions of the figure. One can wear her helmet and one can have it off. So perhaps I will sort of rectify her season 3 hair by putting the helmet on and sort of getting around it that way. So I thought it was quite interesting to check out the shoulder plates, because sometimes, depending on the character, the shoulder plates are sort of attached across at the top, and sometimes they are fixed on the sort of the actual shoulder of the arm. So these ones, if I can sort of lift it up gently, they are attached at the sort of the strap, so they are actually separate to the arm, which means that we can actually move the arms around quite well. They are a little bit rubbery, but they're quite not so flimsy. Certainly on some of the Vader figures I've found, they kind of swing around a lot. These have quite a wide attachment strap. It's a little bit hard to show there. It's not like those sort of little thin straps. It's the whole sort of area there. So they don't sort of want to swing around too much, even though they're just attached there and not at the arm. So doesn't restrict her arms from coming up, which is nice. A little bit harder to sort of rotate them up because they are separate. If I try and put her arm straight up, it doesn't really want to go up more than that. So I can rotate her arm up in front of it. It does start to look a little bit awkward because it kind of should be more attached to the arm. So it does get a little bit odd when we start trying to move her arm straight up, but out to the sides, no problem. It does take a little bit of, I kind of like to sort of press it back down, try and sort of encourage it back into that low position, because it does tend to stick out a little bit. You kind of sort of nudge it back down there a little bit. I'm probably not going to be putting her arms up because I don't want to kind of deform that plastic sort of in an odd way by keeping her sort of permanently with her arms up. I do really like the sculpting on her sort of arm section here. The sort of complicated undersuit, the flight suit that Mandalorians wear, kind of has like this short sleeve and then a long sleeve coming out from underneath it. There's some really nice little stitching lines, and you can kind of see like the striped straps. If I just move her arm out, you can kind of see the sculpting of that sort of strap there at the chest. Really nice. I like the wrinkles and all of that kind of stuff going on here. Just the modern era of Hasbro, where they really focus on all the sort of wrinkles and the way that fabric moves and drapes and kind of gathers in places like behind the knees. It's really nice. It just adds a level of detail. So let's check out her elbows. I quite actually like the fact that the sort of the design lines on her arms almost completely hide the articulation point. I was sort of looking there, wondering, almost couldn't see it, the way that it's blending in there with the plastic color. Really nice. So she does have slightly thinner arms. Of course, the female characters do tend to have slightly sort of smaller proportions, especially in the arms. So she's a little bit smaller. Sometimes the attachment points on these smaller characters can be a little bit tighter because we've just got not as much plastic. This is a really small articulation point there, and I'm trying to, she's a little stiff out of the packaging. I'm trying to bend her elbows without putting too much tension there on that, but we got there in the end. Okay, so now she's got her arms bent. That's about as far of a sort of an angle as I'm going to get there on her elbows, not going up too much higher than that because we are hitting on her gauntlets there, but we can get her hands into a pretty reasonable sort of holding her blaster pistols pose there. A little bit tight because she's fresh out of the packaging, so I can rotate her hands as usual. Of course, she does have a very small side to side sort of rocking articulation there, but I'm not getting too much movement out of that. It's just really minimal. It's not really going to hold a pose there, so that's almost not really important. Interesting that she's actually got, it's not quite rubbery hands, but a little bit more flexible. They feel more flexible than other ones, and it's a little bit, I don't know if this is just a little bit of extra plastic. The sculpting on this, it's a little bit hard to show. The sculpting on this finger just looks a little bit like we've got a little bit of extra plastic there. It just looks a little bit clumpy. I don't know how to describe it. A little bit softer there for that trigger finger. It is separate. We've got a little bit of separation of her trigger finger from the rest of her fingers there. Of course, we've got the separate thumb. Same again on the other hand, that slightly separate trigger finger, because she has two blaster pistols, so she needs to have a good sort of blaster pistol grip on both hands. So we'll test out her accessories shortly. So of course, her chest armor gives us a pretty good place to add in that sort of mid-torso articulation. And she moves very smoothly. That's not fighting me at all. And she's not snapping back to the center. She can move around. There's just a little bit of a click. She kind of wants to have, you know, certain stopping points there, but that is very smooth. I like that. A little bit of front to back, not too much. I can hold it in a little bit of a position. It's not adding a huge amount of variety there, but she does have that really nice smooth movement there. We can just see that sort of part of the small of her back there above her belt. Looks pretty nice. Good movement there. So hopefully these being rubbery, we can lift them up and move her sort of legs around without getting in the way. We do have that mid-thigh sort of swivel articulation there, but we do have a very prominent sculpted element there, which does get cut in half as soon as we start to move that, which is not my favorite, but I know that just that little extra bit of articulation can be helpful when trying to pose your figures. And of course, the holsters will kind of cover that up. So that's probably a good thing there, because as soon as you start to move it, it looks just a little bit odd. Generally, I like having the sculpting lines matching up as best I can, but I know that, you know, I tend to stand my figures up pretty straight. Other people are getting a little bit more adventurous with their posing and their toy photography. So let's test out her posing. So let's test out how well we can open up her legs, because I know Hasbro has been using a new style of attachment for action figure, particularly around the hips of their Star Wars figures. So I can actually spread her hips out quite wide. That's quite nice. And hopefully that means that we can get up to the front. A little tight there just at the top, but I can get fairly high. If I put that leg back to sort of neutral, we can get a better idea about how high her leg can kick up there. That's about as high as that one wants to go. And let's test towards the back. Yep, good range of motion here. She's moving quite nicely, a little stiff because she's fresh out of the packet. But yeah, good movement there. Okay, just quickly testing the other leg. Oh, knocked off her backpack there. Okay, and yeah, good movement. So I'm hoping that means that she'll be fun to do different poses with. I'll just pop that out of the way. Let's test her knees. So her knee plate armor is attached to her thigh. You can see there it's just kind of hanging down in front of her knee, which generally does a pretty good job of hiding the articulation point. It's visible in the back, but as soon as we flex the knee, it's a little bit more visible in the front. But because we've got the knee plate, it kind of hangs over and hides that, which is nice. Let's see how deep in the we can go. Oh, that's pretty reasonable. We get a nice right angle there with her knees. I can go straight there. We'll just test out. I'm not sure how much. Oh, okay, that's actually more of a pointed toe than I thought we might get. especially because of that sort of high curve there on the back of the ankles. That's really nice. So she should be fun to pose. She is a little bit more acrobatic than some of the other sort of Mandalorian characters in that. So I quite like that. That's a good amount of articulation and not too much of a fight to get things to move. Just those elbows were the tightest part on my particular figure. She kind of wants to hold her arms in that position. So I'm just going to pop. Actually, I might leave that backpack off because let's test out her helmet. This is the part that always makes me nervous. I don't like feeling like I'm breaking my figures, and there's something about popping a component off that feels like I'm purposely trying to break a figure, but I really do want to see the helmet on, and it's going to be easier to check out the details of that once we've got it on. So let's pop her head off, and I'm hoping this won't be too much of a fight because sometimes these ones are really tricky. I have had ones where the attachment peg came off and it was a job to try and get them back on. Okay, so I was able to get her head off. We can see that sort of attachment piece there, and she's got that attachment sort of peg hole there. So hopefully this is not going to be too hard to line them up and click this into place. Sometimes it can move a little bit. Oh, okay. Oh, bit of a click there, but I got that into place. Now we can take a closer look at this figure with her helmet on, because I know that helmet proportion is a really important element for Star Wars action figures that wear a helmet. And I know in the past we had those sort of rubbery, squishy ones that would fit over, but because Bo-Katan has a little bit more of a bulkier hairstyle compared to, say, clone troopers or other sort of male characters that generally have short hair, she is going to have a swappable helmet. Sometimes I kind of mix up my terms and I say removable because I think I'm like, removing the head, but I forget that removable helmets generally mean the ones that slip on over top of the head. This is a swappable helmet there. And yeah, so you can just kind of make out the sort of the human skin there just at the top of the neck peeking out on the underside. So it kind of gives a good illusion that there is still a human head there on the underside. It looks pretty well proportioned, but I have to say I'm probably not the best judge for that. But yeah, obviously if it was a helmet that would fit over the head, it would be too oversized. It would be quite big and rubbery and sort of sit out there. Now, one thing that I noted that I forgot to, I sort of spotted it when I was looking at the two carded figures side by side. I was looking at the paintwork on the face, but I forgot to note that the rangefinder on this one is actually painted differently. Just quickly grabbing this one, the carded one. The rangefinder on the original version is silver with a black sort of rangefinder there at the top. This new one, it is just silver. It's not, we don't have a black painted part there at the top there. The whole rangefinder is just silver. So I forgot to mention that, but it is articulated. We can move it down there. The back of the helmet, we've just got some sculpting details and that painted dark blue line joining up to the details at each sort of ear section here at the side. But what, of course, is the standout feature of Bo-Katan's helmet is her night owl paint job. So I said earlier that I had bought this one online. I didn't get to see the paint job there, and it looks pretty good. Much better than my earlier version. I don't have those smudges. Now, she does have a weathered helmet, so it's kind of funny. Sometimes you look at things and go, oh no, it's a bit scratched or something like that, but we do see that we've got these sort of weathered elements across the helmet. So when you see these little lines here, it's hard to tell if that's actually intentional weathering or, just like a tiny little scratch, but that's kind of the fun of it, isn't it? It doesn't matter. It just looks like weathering. So I've got the black on the white, and we've also got this kind of, it's like a light gray, almost leaning to, it almost looks purple under certain lighting for sort of the eyes here at the top. I mention it every time, but I'm really particular about the visor paint lining up with the sculpted visor lines. It really bothers me, especially on sort of the vertical part, if it's a little bit sort of spilt over to one side or another. Really nice and straight on this one, matching up really well, especially around her eyes. Very, very nice. We've got those darker cheeks lining up nice with the sculpting lines there as well. Overall, I'm just really happy with the paint job on my particular helmet. Looks really nice. Good match of blue as well. I do believe this is blue plastic, just because of the underside. It also looks blue, so I believe it is blue plastic. Matching up quite well. Just a shade off the blue paint for the armor here. But looking at it, from sort of this distance, that looks like a really good match. match. Sometimes you really can tell a big difference between a colored plastic and the paint that is trying to match to the plastic, but subtle difference there, possibly a little bit more on camera than it looks in person. And if I'm going to be posing her on the shelf, I'm probably not going to notice that much at all there. So she's looking really good with her helmet on, I have to say, because I was a little bit disappointed that they didn't update her hairstyle, even though of course she's got that really nice digital printing there for her face details. I think I'm going to keep this figure with her helmet on, kind of build her like she is on the backing card rather than on Plazir-15 where she doesn't really wear her helmet. So now we've got her backpack, we'll put that one back on, her jetpack, sorry, and now she looks very good, all set up. Okay, so let's test out her blaster pistols. As I noted when I was comparing the two carded figures together, I am a little bit disappointed that these feel like a downgrade from the original figure version in that they are a dark gray plastic with no painted details. We don't have the painted grip there. We've got that little cutout sort of trigger guard there. It's not too looped, it's not enclosed, so that should fit on her fingers pretty well. They are pretty small and slender, but they are, of course, you know, following what we have on the screen there. So of course we've got two of them. I'm going to test them in her hands and then we'll pop them in her holsters as well. So I'm hoping, because we've got that open sort of little circle there, that they're going to fit into her hands pretty well. Also, the grip is pretty small. They are a little bit flexible, so sometimes that can be a little bit hard trying to sort of push them into the action figure hands. Oh, that the actual sort of accessory wants to bend more than it wants to go into the hand, and I'm getting a little bit of that this time here. It's flexing a little bit rather than going into the grip. Okay, a little bit of sort of adjustment there, but they do look good when they're in her hands there. Very nice. Her finger is lining up very nicely with that sort of little cutout there for that finger. Let's do this one. I'm just not sure what to make of that sort of finger there. Perhaps it's going to look, it's a little bit more disguised when I put a blaster pistol in her hand. It's not quite as obvious there. Just that sort of little extra, it's like just a tiny little bit of extra plastic just on that finger, sort of with her glove. Perhaps her gloves are a little bit bunched up today, but she looks really good with her blaster pistols in her hands there. Fairly easy to get in. She holds them pretty well. I don't think they're gonna, some accessories kind of fall out very easily. She's holding them pretty well. Not too hard to take out of her hands, which is useful. Let's test them in her holsters, because I think I'm going to be putting them in my holsters for my particular figure. So they slot in there very nice, just the tip just peeking out on that bottom little circle there, looking pretty good. I'm just going to test to see how hard it is to get them out. Okay, pretty easy to get them out, so that's good. I'm always a little bit worried that I'm going to put an accessory into a holster and then it's going to basically be in there forever because they're very hard to get out. Sometimes they really grip in there. So they look well proportioned. They look pretty good sitting on her hips like that. Of course, the holsters are a little bit oversized for her body, but they are rubbery and they actually function. So it's a bit of a trade-off when it comes to figures. Okay, so last accessory, we have the dark saber. So this one is not as rubbery as I think I've had in other versions. I should have pulled out all of my dark saber accessories. I feel this one is less rubbery. It's got a little bit of a sort of a flick to it rather than sort of a true wobble. There is a flex to it, but not as rubbery. So I quite like that. Of course, we've got this white painted edge. We don't have sort of any of that sort of electricity effect painted on this one. It is just a white edge and a black hilt. I do like, oh, it's kind of small. I do like the detail on the dark saber hilt here. Very nice. So it does have a little bit of a flat edge to it. So I'm hoping she will hold it quite nicely. And we'll just get that in her hand. Yeah, it goes in fairly easily. It's not a tight fit in her hand. I feel like I could knock that out a little bit, but she holds that nice. You can see that in her hand there. Of course, it's going to be a little bit tricky, I feel, to get her to do a two-handed grip on the dark saber pose, just because my particular figure has tight elbows, because I really sort of want to get her hands together with a dark saber sort of two-handed grip, because if we can see on the backing card, they do actually pose her on the back with her two hands holding it. So I know technically it's possible, but sometimes, you know, it does take a little bit of a while to sort of get that. So I'll probably work on doing a two-handed grip with this particular figure, because I feel like her holding the Darksaber with her helmet on, as pictured on the backing card, is how I want to display this version of the figure, because the earlier version, she doesn't have the Darksaber, and I feel like the earlier version is more accurate with that particular shorter hairstyle as we see here earlier on in the live-action Mandalorian series. After spending a few minutes, I was able to get my particular Bo-Katan action figure to hold the Darksaber in two hands, just like she is pictured on the back of the backing card. I always expect that if Hasbro can pose their action figure for the toy photography on the back, that means that fans should be able to replicate that with their figure as well. So I'm very happy to get her to hold the Darksaber, because this is probably how I want to have my particular figure displayed. That way I can kind of bypass the inaccurate hair, although that is of course a little bit of a sticking point for fans. If they can upgrade Ahsoka, they should be able to upgrade Bo-Katan to be accurate to her season 3 appearance as well. I like the helmet, I like the paintwork on it, the articulation is good, and of course she looks right just being able to finally wield the Darksaber. I really loved Bo-Katan's story arc, and I really hope we haven't seen the last of her. I hope we do see her in the Mandalorian and Grogu film that is coming out in the future, because I love this character and I want to see more from her. So I'm really happy to have this updated, if not completely updated in the way that I'd want figure, of course, but we do have her new shoulder piece and she looks really good with the Darksaber. I know we have the Darksaber accessory from a few other figures, but I tend to be a little bit of a stickler in that I like my figures to hold the accessories that they come with. That way I'm not mixing them up too much. So she comes with her own, which is good, and she looks really nice. As a Bo-Katan fan and collector, I'm really happy to have this one for my collection, even if it's not too different from the earlier version, but she looks really good and I'm happy to have her. I was really worried that this wave would not hit New Zealand, because I really wanted to grab this one for my collection. So she looks good. I like it. This was fun. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars collectible and had a lot of fun checking out all of the details. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a vintage collection fan, I recently opened up the Ahsoka Tano Paradia figure. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole vintage collection playlist. This is the way.